Chapter 167. Hey, Master, you're back? At this moment in Jiaoyang Palace, Ji Chu squatted at the entrance of the palace, drowsy. In a daze, he saw a tall figure in a black robe walking over. He shook his head fiercely. After confirming that it was his master, he hurriedly stood up and ran in front of him. Master, why did you come back? Did His Majesty suddenly return to Fengqi Palace to catch them in the act? The handsome man's face was as black as ink. He directly walked past him, ignoring him. Ji Chu looked puzzled and quickly followed. He didn't dare to talk nonsense anymore. Master, His Majesty didn't return to Fengqi Palace. He went directly to the imperial study. When he learned that the jewelry he had bestowed to the former empress had all been burned, he seemed to have been drained of his soul. He didn't even sit on the dragon carriage and stumbled all the way to the imperial study. And Ji Chu's tone couldn't hide the gloating. His master usually loved to hear these words, especially when Feng Zhouqing lost his composure. But now, he found that his master seemed unwilling to listen. There was a bath in the side hall of Jiaoyang Palace. Because there was no one living in it, the cold water would automatically be changed every day. This servant of Jiaoyang Palace would never think of changing the hot water for the bath. Watching his master enter the side hall, Ji Chu followed all the way. Then, bang, water splashed everywhere, and the ice-cold water froth caused him to shiver. His eyes widened as he looked at Mo Wushang, who had sunk himself into the ice water. Master, are you still showing that your body isn't cold enough? His whole body was bone-chilling, and cold sweat went straight to his heart. The restlessness in his body finally calmed down a little because of the bone-chilling cold. Mo Wushang's tense nerves slowly recovered. Regaining his rationality, he opened his deep eyes and glanced at the man on the shore with wide eyes. Say it again, Ji Chu. The corner of Ji Chu's mouth twitched. Looking at his master's dignified appearance in the water, he repeated what he had just said. The man's dark eyes were tightly shut. His long, curly eyelashes were stained with sparkling water droplets. His smooth and delicate skin was pitilessly beautiful, like an immortal in a painting. After a long time, only then did the man slowly open his eyes and reply, "Go to Zhengzhou personally." Central Plains? Ji Chu was puzzled. Master sent this subordinate to Continent Center. Is there something you need me to do? Hearing this, Mo Wushang slowly closed his eyes again. After a long time, he lightly said, "The eldest young master of the Shun clan has gone to the central province and hasn't returned for several days. Jia is worried." Ji Chu. Then why did he have to go? He was his master's sweetheart. Asking him to go for such a small matter? There was no lack of embroidered uniform secret guards with high martial arts skills behind master, so he could just casually send one. Do you have any objections? She could feel the endless resentment and dissatisfaction emanating from his body. Mo Wushang's cold eyes stared at him. Ji Chu was so frightened that he immediately straightened his body. No objection, no objection. Since he is Imperial Concubine Shun's big brother, then he is one of us. This subordinate will immediately set off. I will spur the horse and rush to Zhengzhou as soon as possible. Chapter 168. His expression made Ji Chu feel like he had seen a ghost, with goosebumps all over his body. Why did his master look like he was in lovesickness? Stepping out of the hall and feeling the cold wind blowing on his face, Ji Chu secretly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and enjoyed the grey moonlight. For the first time, he felt it was better to stand outside. At the same time, Shun Yu Kai, who was far away in Jinju, was also enjoying the scenery with him. On the roof of the second floor of the inn, Shun Yu Kai was wearing a crescent robe, with a twisted handsome face. He was holding a pile of dog's tail grass in his hand, pulling off their heads one by one, kneading them in his palm, flattening them, and then throwing them down from the roof as if to vent his anger. After venting, he threw away all the dog's tail grass in his hand. He flew down from the roof and picked up the dog's tail grass on the ground. Then he flew back to the roof and repeated his actions. He went back and forth at least 3 times. He looked up at the moon, which was round and bright. The moonlight shone on his body, lengthening his slender figure. His trembling hands touched the crooked shadow on the roof. With tears in his eyes, I'll grow crooked if I don't see you any longer. After that, he stared at a door on the right with great sadness. A black light suddenly appeared, and countless sharp blades seemed to poke the door without leaving a hole. Women were delicate and troublesome. Women were troublesome. They couldn't compare with his little sister at all. She panted after 2 steps, vomited after 2 mouthfuls of food. Was she still a 16-year-old girl? Was she a white-haired old lady? Shun Yukai sat alone on the roof and sighed. I promised to bring her back in 3 days, but now it's been 4 days. Gee, my heart is aching. He wiped the tears in the corner of his eyes. Alas, I want to knock her out and carry her to the palace. Young Master Shun. Young Master Shun. At this time, there was a hurried shout from downstairs. Hearing the anxious voice, Shun Yuechi's handsome face instantly darkened, and he looked down fiercely. What are you shouting for? Can't you let me miss the little baby in my heart? Qiao Yu was startled by the man's reprimand. Tears started to fall down. Seeing her cry, Shun Yukai couldn't help it either. The tears he had just held back flowed down his handsome face. Qiao Yu, young Master Shun. You. What happened to you? Shun Yukai jumped down from the roof and landed in front of her. She looked at the little maid's red face and sobbed. Tell me, what happened to your miss? My miss is not used to the food in Jinju. The soil and water in Jinju are not compatible with Zhengzhou. Miss wants to eat Zhengzhou's steamed buns. Please. Young Master Shun, please send Miss back to Zhengzhou. When Miss is full, she will enter the palace with young Master Shun, back to the Central Plains. Shun Yukai almost laughed out of anger at her words. 3 days ago, your young miss was hungry, so this young master brought her back to Zhengzhou. After eating, we traveled day and night to Jinju. After that, in the middle of the night, she was hungry again, so this young master brought her back again. In these 3 days, we went back and forth at least 4 or 5 times. Shun Yuechi's handsome face turned cold. Chapter 169. The boss of Juji Bun Shop is the only one who cares about my miss. He knows that my miss doesn't have enough to eat, so every time when the bun is ready, he will secretly leave 2 for my miss. My miss is a kind-hearted person. Once she enters the palace, I'm afraid she won't be able to come back. She won't even be able to see the boss of the bun shop again. The only thing in her heart is that she wants to go back and see him a few more times. Young Master Shun, this servant dares to swear to the heavens that my miss has absolutely no intention of deliberately teasing you. Shun Yukai listened and laughed. Your miss misses the boss of the bun shop, but this young master doesn't miss my little sister. If it weren't for my little sister's repeated reminders, this young master wouldn't be bothered to deal with you. Qiao Yu looked embarrassed, but this servant's miss hasn't eaten for nearly a day. If she doesn't return to Zhengzhou, this servant is afraid that her body will be weak and she won't be able to enter the palace to see imperial concubine Nyang Nyang. Hearing this, Shun Yukai directly walked past her with a cold face. Qiao Yu didn't understand what he meant. Seeing him go to her miss's residence, she was shocked and quickly followed. Young Master Shun, my miss is still unmarried. This boudoir, you can't break in. Shun Yukai was too lazy to pay attention to her. When she came over, he slapped her away. Can't break in? Why can't I break in? This young master has brought her here. You've been making things difficult for this young master along the way. This young master can't even break in a mere boudoir. Qiao Yu wanted to stop him again. Shun Yukai didn't give her the chance. The door was kicked open with a bang. The beautiful face of the woman inside immediately came into view. Shun Yukai had seen Li Yingying's appearance before. Just as Shun Yueji said, she looked like the late empress. Her demeanor, tone, and the face were more than 70% similar. His vision was blurred for a moment. She just stood there without saying a word. If she wore the white clothes that Jiyu Yuqin loved to wear, it would definitely cause people to misunderstand that she was the late empress. Seeing Shun Yukai staring at her miss, Qiao Yu rushed up and stood in front of Li Yingying. Young Master Shun, please behave. Shun Yukai came back to his senses. His dazed handsome face instantly became distorted and cold. I'll ask you one last time. Do you want to eat the food here? Tears welled up in Li Yingying's almond-shaped eyes. Hearing Shun Yuechi's threatening words, She turned her head to the side and didn't reply. Okay. Shin Yu-kai was so angry that he laughed. He pointed at her and said, fine. You should be glad that I never hit women. Young Master Shin, what are you trying to do? Although my Li family is only a small family and can't compare to your Shin family's power in Foam Country, this is under the feet of the Emperor. It's not a place for you to mess around. You. Shin Yu-kai angrily slammed the door and left, leaving Xiao Yu and Li Yingying staring at each other in the room. They waited for about the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn. Shin Yu-kai retraced his steps. Xiao Yu, who had just lowered her guard, immediately raised it again. She glared at him fiercely. Young Master Shin, she saw that he was carrying a package in his hand. As he entered the room, the familiar fragrance from the package immediately filled the room. Li Yingying's eyes were filled with joy as if she had already guessed what was in the package. Shin Yu-kai threw the package towards Xiao Yu's arms. The bun was still steaming. Xiao Yu could feel it through a layer of cloth. Chapter 170. Before I came back from Zhengzhou, I specially ordered my subordinates to bring them here. This is to prevent you from using such an excuse to make me bring you back. These buns are enough for you to eat all the way to the capital. If you dare to cause trouble for me again, he snorted coldly, I will rush into the palace and ask for my little sister's opinion. I will deal with you when I come back. Xiao Yu was speechless. After dealing with the two eyesores, Shin Yu-kai climbed up to the roof again. Holding her chin, she looked at the cold moon and sighed. Can you feel my longing for you? Now that I look at the cold moon, it looks so much like you. It is so round and cute. Phoenix Palace Achu. Your Highness, what's wrong? Did you catch a cold because of the cold? Double Happiness draped a cloak over her. Your Highness, it's late. Are you waiting for the regent or the emperor? Shin Yueji sat on the chaise longue. After hearing Double Happiness's words, her hand that was holding the cloak paused. She rubbed her nose for a long time. Who was she waiting for? Feng Jiuqing would not come tonight, but Mo Wushang had said before he left that he would come back tonight. Suppressing some thoughts that she should not have, she rubbed her itchy nose. I won't catch a cold. It's warm in Phoenix Palace and I have never felt cold. Is someone scolding me behind my back? Otherwise, why would she sneeze all of a sudden? Double Happiness sighed. This servant heard from the elders in the residence that 1 is missing, 2 is scolding, and 3 is catching a cold. The person in the harem who can scold you the most is undoubtedly Imperial Concubine Moon, whose tongue was cut off by you today. But your Highness just sneezed, so it should be General, Madam, and Young Master. But according to this servant, it should be Young Master. Shin Yueji turned to look at her. Are you so sure? Of course. Eldest Young Master once told this servant that a day without seeing your Highness is like an autumn. Eldest Young Master once whispered to this servant that if your Highness marries in the future, he will move into the son-in-law's residence. His room will be separated from your Highness's by a wall. When he misses your Highness, he can go through the wall. Shin Yueji, so. Double Happiness replied with a straight face, most likely, it's the eldest Young Master. Eldest Young Master hasn't returned from the central province for so long, I don't know what he's thinking of your Highness. He's probably sitting on the roof of some tea house, gazing at the moon. This servant reckons that when he looks at the moon, he thinks it looks like your Highness. Hearing this, Shin Yueji's mouth twitched as she looked at the cold moon outside the window. With some uncertainty, she asked, does this pancake-sized moon look like me? She thought about it seriously. The moon definitely doesn't look like your Highness, but your Highness, you can't stop eldest Young Master from fantasizing. If eldest Young Master fantasizes too much, not to mention the moon, even the grave will think that your Highness is buried in it. Shin Yueji. Hey. She poured her a cup of tea and mumbled, Nyang, don't underestimate eldest Young Master. When Nyang was young, I went on a long journey with Furen and didn't tell eldest Young Master. When we returned, we saw eldest Young Master hanging himself with a rope. The Empress was young at that time, so perhaps she doesn't remember. Chapter 171. After waiting for nearly an hour. Mo Wushang finally arrived. Double Happiness was about to change the pot of hot tea when she bumped into the man who was coming towards her. The man had already noticed it and moved aside. Double Happiness bumped into the pillar. She was about to curse when she saw the cold and familiar handsome face in front of her. She swallowed hard and quickly knelt on the ground to salute. "Greetings, Regent." Mo Wushang glanced at her lightly. "Is your master asleep?" "No, no." Double Happiness shook her head repeatedly. "Her Highness has been waiting for Regent when she heard that you were coming back. If Regent didn't come, Her Highness didn't plan to sleep either." With these words, it could be seen that Mo Wushang's cold and aloof face had become more approachable. Double Happiness secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to her wit. The man's voice was no longer as cold as before. "Get up." Yes, thank you, Regent." "Regent, hurry up and go in. Don't let Her Highness wait for too long. I believe Her Highness will be very happy when she knows that Regent is here." After Mo Wushang came in, he saw the exquisite figure sitting on the beauty chair. The redness and swelling on her hand had disappeared a little, and the broken skin seemed to have grown new skin, which was very beautiful. He walked over silently. Perhaps Shun Yueji was thinking about things seriously. She didn't notice when he walked up to her. Until a big hand fell on her shoulder. She reacted. The man lifted her up from the chair and sat her on his lap. "Are you thinking about me?" These 4 simple words made Shun Yueji's little face flush red with a whoosh. Just now, she was indeed thinking about him. No matter what, the person in her mind was indeed him. She wanted to deny it, but she met the man's gentle eyes. Shun Yueji moved her lips and found that he had changed his clothes during the time he was away. Even his hair was a little wet. It seemed that he came over without drying himself. There was even a small tuft of hair stuck to his handsome face, which added a kind of evil beauty to him. Shun Yueji stood up from his body and looked at his wet hair, which was still dripping water. "You left for so long. Did you go to take a bath?" With his legs empty, Mo Wushang's expression turned ugly. He casually scooped her into his arms and said in a huff, "I'm going." "Why don't you dry your hair first?" The man's handsome face was extremely dark. Shun Yueji glanced at him. "You're wet. You've made me wet." Mo Wushang left with a black face. He didn't even turn his head. Seeing him leaving so decisively, Shun Yueji couldn't help but run after him. "Where are you going?" "I'll listen to you." Shun Yueji. He reacted to these 4 words. The corner of Shun Yueji's mouth twitched as she blocked his way. Seeing the man's unfriendly face, she scratched her head and said, "Well, since you're here, you can wipe it here. You can't go back to Diaoyang Palace in the middle of the night. It's quite troublesome to go back and forth." Seeing the man's gloomy face relax a little, Shun Yueji took his hand and pulled him back. She found a soft towel from the inner hall and covered his head with it. She gently and considerately wiped his wet hair. "The Regent has been away for so long. Did you only go to take a bath? What do you want to ask? That is." Chapter 172. As smart as he was, how could he not understand the meaning of her words? Mo Wushang closed his eyes, and his deep black eyes were buried. The next moment, her hand was held by the man. She fell into the man's arms and was hugged by the man. "Done." Shun Yueji smiled. "I'm really worried about my brother. I'm afraid that there will be something wrong with him. Fortunately, there is the Regent. The people around the Regent are very efficient. As long as the Regent is willing to help me, I will be relieved." The man's cold lips twitched with self-mockery. "I will do what I promised you." "I understand. The Regent is a gentleman. How can he break his promise to a weak woman like me?" Mo Wushang's plump fingertips gently pinched her red lips, and his eyes were dark. This posture was too ambiguous. Shun Yueji blushed and quickly got up from the man's arms. "Regent, are you going to stay here tonight?" she asked. "Are you going to stay here tonight?" Yi Shunga asked. "Yes." Shun Yueji blushed. "The Regent wants to stay here, which is giving me face. But after all, I am a man and a woman alone with the Regent. It is not safe for me to be in the same room. I have been in the palace for a few months, but I am still a virgin, so I want to make some rules with the regent. I won't touch you. Hehe. These words made Shin-Yueji want to laugh. Looking at the man's serious face, she had an illusion that she was measuring the heart of a gentleman with her own mean measure. She walked to the tea table, took a cup of tea, and placed it in the middle of the bed. In the end, she stuffed a pillow in the middle. This is the first condition. Mo Wuxiang glanced at her busy figure and didn't answer. His silence fell into Shin-Yueji's eyes as acquiescence. The second condition: there is always a contingency. If the emperor suddenly comes back, the regent is good at martial arts and must be aware of it. I hope that the regent will leave first and not be discovered by the emperor. There was still silence. The third condition. Shin-Yueji raised 3 fingers. I have compromised to this point, and I don't even care about my reputation, just to make the regent happy and agree to share a bed with me. Therefore, the third condition is very simple. The regent only needs to comply with the first 2 conditions. Seeing that the man didn't say anything, Shin-Yueji finally realized that something was wrong. She walked up to him and stared at his dark eyes. Regent, are you doubting my character? Shin-Yueji. The man waved his robe, and Shin-Yueji only felt a gust of cold wind blowing in front of her. Then, there was a crackling sound. It was the tea set and pillow she had just placed on the bed. They rolled on the ground, and the tea set broke into pieces. She narrowed her eyes, looked at the mess on the ground, and then glared at the man's enchanting face. Seeing the man glancing at her chest, Shin-Yueji realized that something bad was going on. Shin-Yueji hurriedly covered her chest. I won't do it. Then I'll change it. The first condition is not to hit my acupoints and not to touch me. Mo Wuxiang's beautiful brows frowned again. Don't touch the back. She gritted her teeth. Mo Wuxiang, don't push your luck. It's not easy to keep you here. Do you know how long I've been thinking about it? If the regent doesn't agree to my conditions, then continue to live in your Jiaoyang palace. My Phoenix Palace can't afford to raise a big Buddha like you. Speak. You're so fierce. Chapter 173. Looking up at the beam, Shin-Yueji helplessly looks at his aggrieved face. Regent, do you still know who you are? He looks away and no longer looks at her. In a few steps, Shin-Yueji stared at him condescendingly for a while and said tentatively, Regent, are you short of women? Mo Wuxiang slowly raises his head, and his dark eyes fall on her delicate little face. I'm short of you. Her heart is beating wildly. It's almost jumping out of her throat. Shin-Yueji reaches out and slowly caresses her pretty face. She doesn't need to think to know that her hot face must be red. She thought that after the incident with Feng Jiuqing, she would take this matter lightly. Even if she died, she would never have thought that Mo Wuxiang would appear. Feng Jiuqing would never say such sweet nothings to her. And Mo Wuxiang, a man who has been protecting her and loving her for so many years, she covers her lips awkwardly and coughs. She is about to say that she can find a woman for him, but she is forced back by his explicit words of love. She swallowed her saliva and realized that her mouth was dry. Ignoring him, she pours herself a cup of tea and swallows it. Mo Wuxiang had been watching her every move. When she finished her tea, he didn't forget to pour another cup for her. He hands the tea to her. Shin-Yueji takes it and thanks him. She is about to drink it. I'm serious. She gulps down the tea. Shin-Yueji doesn't look directly at the man's eyes. She tries to calm down. I know. Otherwise, why is she blushing? The man listens happily and pulls her into his arms. You can only lack me. Shin-Yueji struggles in his arms awkwardly. Didn't you say that there are fireflies in the Imperial Garden tonight? Are you going to take me to see it? Answer me. No. There are so many good men in the world. For a fickle woman like me, if you want to pick, then pick the best. Hiss, he pinches her again. Shin-Yueji glares at him angrily. From the very beginning, this man hated her so much that he wanted to kill her. However, in just 1 or 2 days, he changed so quickly. There must be some premeditated plan. She, Shin-Yueji, was not a fool. Even if his words of love moved her heart, she was not an irrational person. There were flames dancing in the bottom of his dark eyes. Because of her denial, the flames gradually dimmed. Mo Wushang's lips curled into a sarcastic smile. His heart felt as though it was being pulled by someone. No matter how hard he tried, he never had a place in her heart. The only reason she was willing to be with him was because she could take advantage of him. Mo Wushang hugged her tightly, not allowing her to struggle, as his smooth and clean chin pressed against her restless little head. Do you know that there is no need for you to scheme against me? Even if you are using me, I will enjoy the process of being used by you. At least, in your eyes, I will be there. The man didn't respond to her. Shen Yueji didn't give up and asked again, but he still ignored her. She had no choice but to go to bed. However, the moment she climbed up, she realized that he immediately got up and followed behind her. As she got on the bed, he followed her. Shen Yueji's back was facing him, and her ears were sensitive to his movements. Sure enough, as soon as the man got on the bed, he immediately reached out and pulled her into his arms. Shen Yueji's mouth twitched in his arms, listening to the man's strong heartbeat. Hey, Mo Wushang, what are you doing? Chapter 174. You said that you would take me to the Imperial Garden to see fireflies. You can't go back on your word. You don't have me in your heart. You taking me to the Imperial Garden to see fireflies and whether I have you in my heart or not are two different things. What conflict is there? Hearing the man's muffled voice, Shen Yueji couldn't help but mutter in his arms. Feeling the tightness of her waist, she knew that she had said the wrong thing again. You didn't like me first. I've liked you for so many years, but you've always been indifferent to me and almost killed me. I finally told you that I didn't like you anymore and entered the palace to be the emperor's woman. In the end, you suddenly appeared and said that you liked me. Tell me, aren't you very strange? That's not you. What's not me? Shen Yueji was shocked. The man's big hand wandered to her waist and said angrily, if it's not me, then it's not me. I only like you. Shen Yueji grimaced in pain. Can't you remember that you're a man? Pinch me when you're angry. You're not a woman. Why are you learning from a woman? The man immediately let go of her. He gently rubbed her slender waist. How did you do the fireflies in the Imperial Garden? Didn't you spend so much effort to get the fireflies for me to see? If you don't take me to see them now, then everything you've worked hard to prepare will be in vain. Isn't it a pity? Sigh. He sighed with remorse. No matter how much Shen Yueji's lips rubbed, the man didn't let go. You win. Shen Yueji gritted her teeth in anger. She cursed his 18 generations of ancestors in her heart. This stingy man, whoever fell for him would have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. He was harder to coax than a woman. Damn. Sleep. Not long after, she heard a slight snoring coming from his arms. The man's dark eyes flickered. Shen Yueji widened her eyes in horror and stared at the handsome face in front of her that had been magnified countless times. The sleepiness that she had gathered with great difficulty instantly dissipated. Her delicate lips were nibbled by the man, and the soft touch pressed against her lips. It was soft and numb, with endless lingering. Following the man's kiss, her waist was lifted by the man, and she pressed against the man's chest even more tightly. In the dark hall, an ambiguous atmosphere was spreading. She was stunned for a few seconds. Suddenly, she opened her mouth and bit the man's lips. A sharp pain assaulted him, but Mo Wushang only furrowed his brows. He gently nibbled on her delicate lips a few times before releasing her. Shen Yueji wiped her lips hard and stared at the fierce look in the man's eyes. She was so scared that her hand trembled. She quickly wiped her lips with the back of her hand. The fierceness in the man's eyes dissipated, and she was like a deflated ball. After about the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. Something wasn't right. Mo Wushang was forcing himself on her. Why was she feeling guilty? When she sorted out her thoughts and looked at the man again, she caught a glimpse of the man's evasive eyes. She caught him red-handed. What did you say under the bed just now? Don't sleep. Shen Yueji was completely furious. Are you crazy? You won't take me to the Imperial Garden, and you won't let me sleep. What do you want? Coax me. Chapter 175. Shen Yueji stared at him as if she had seen a ghost. What's wrong with you? You don't have me in your heart. Just because of this. Mo Wushang's dark eyes locked onto her. Although he did not speak, his dark and expectant eyes silently responded to her. Yes, it was because of this. Shun Yu and Ji Yunshu even had the illusion that if you don't pacify me, I won't let you have a good night's sleep. In the face of his childish behavior, Shun Yueji was completely convinced. She patted his handsome face and said, "Okay, I admit it. I have you in my heart, okay?" Perfunctory. Gritting her teeth, Shun Yueji straightened her face and looked at him with a serious expression. She squeezed out each word from between her teeth. Ben Gong said, "Ben Gong has you in my heart. Is this okay?" Indifferent. She got off the bed angrily. Shun Yueji stared at the handsome man lying on the bed. His messy hair, messy clothes, and loose robe were unbuttoned, revealing his white and strong chest. She stomped her feet angrily. She picked up a teapot from the coffee table and smashed it towards the man's head. Seeing the hard teapot flying towards him, Mo Wushang did not dodge. He just looked at it coldly. Bang! A loud sound rang out. The hard teapot smashed into her head, and a large patch of red instantly appeared on her fair forehead. Faint traces of blood could be seen on her forehead. Shun Yueji thought he would dodge, so she did not hold back. At the moment when the teapot was about to hit him, Shun Yueji was shocked. If he did not dodge, she would be finished. Looking at the red mark on the man's forehead, Shun Yueji moved her lips and wanted to apologize. "Hurt me." It was another simple, cold, and clear word. Shun Yueji swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. She almost went crazy on the spot. How did she not know that Mo Wushang was such a difficult character? She struggled on the spot for a long time, so long that she took a deep breath, inhaled deeply, and finally, she walked to the front of the bed and bent over to look at the man's pillously handsome face. She held his face affectionately and tried to make herself smile affectionately. "Prince Regent, I have you in my heart." The man's pitch-black eyes flickered, and there was a bottomless abyss in them. The dark vortex was tumbling violently, as if it wanted to suck her whole body in. Shun Yueji stared at the pair of eyes that were as black as the abyss. Her lips were sealed. Their soft lips were pressed against each other, and the familiar scent of the man spread into her nostrils. She had natural facial features and long, beautiful eyelashes. At such a close distance, his face was fair and flawless. His exquisite face was as delicate as a newborn baby's. Knowing that she would be angered, Mo Wushang did not go too deep. He stopped at just the right time on her tender lips and pulled her into his embrace. His low and hoarse voice whispered in her ear, "Remember what you said." Shun Yueji was dizzy from his kiss. It was not until the man carried her out of Feng Qi Palace and they were in the air that she slowly came back to her senses. She lowered her head and looked down. Shuang she had just brought 2 bowls of noodles from the imperial kitchen for her. She looked inside with her head lowered. When she found that they were not inside, she opened her mouth and muttered a few words. Then she sat on the ground, put the 2 bowls of noodles on the ground, and ate them by herself. Chapter 176. In the imperial garden, there was no shortage of rare and strange flowers and plants. The man carried her and sat down on the roof of a house not far away. Small fireflies emitting green light flew around the long path of the imperial garden, illuminating the colorful flowers and plants, making them even more beautiful. The long path was surrounded by many fireflies. Like lanterns hanging on the flowers and plants, they were neatly arranged in rows. Seeing this scene, Shun Yueji was shocked. She glanced at the man beside her. Fireflies lived on the mountains. Although there were many mountains in this imperial garden, they were all arranged according to the scenery. Even if there were fireflies, it would be a miracle. They lived in groups of 3 to 5, and there would not be as many as there were in front of her. There were at least tens of thousands of them, and they were connected together, illuminating everything in the imperial garden. This was the first time she had seen such a scene in her life. Feng Jiuqing was as gentle as water to her, but he would not be like Mo Wushang, who put in so much effort to make her happy. These fireflies seemed easy to catch. With his status, it was not difficult to catch them. However, they seemed to have been trained. They were arranged neatly in the imperial garden, and their numbers were the same. If it was easy to train an animal, then it was much more difficult to train these small fireflies. Her palms were tight, and there was a thin layer of sweat. She was not a heartless person. Even if she had lived twice, her heart was still beating, and she still had feelings. Feng Jiuqing seemed to be gentle and affectionate on the surface, but he would never treat her so carefully. And Mo Wushang seemed to be cold and emotionless, but under his stern face, there was a side of him that touched her the most. She liked fireflies, even if she was not willing to admit it. She had never said it to anyone. Sometimes she imagined that she was like a firefly, small and insignificant in this world. But freedom. She had no freedom since she was a child. She lived in a small cage. She had never eaten good food, and she had never seen the big world. In her world, there was only her own small deserted courtyard, a dilapidated courtyard, and a considerate servant girl. Not only that, she had to bear the daily cold eyes and inhuman torture and abuse. When she was 15 years old, she married the man she loved the most. He protected her very well, indeed very well, and treated her very gently. She had merely changed a small dilapidated courtyard into a big house. She could eat well, dress well, and even have a few more servants. But she still hadn't gone out. The prince's mansion was a cage that imprisoned her. After entering the palace, the cage became bigger. She didn't know what the outside world was like. It seemed like there was only Feng Jiuqing in her world. And then, Feng Jiuqing no longer wanted her. She held out her hand and the little firefly flew towards her and landed on her palm. Fireflies are alive. There is a scorching temperature around them. The Prince Regent is very good to me, but sometimes, it makes me feel unreal. Looking at the firefly in her palm, Shen Yueji could not help but sigh. Ignoring the stiff man beside her, she chuckled. Soon, her hand was in the man's palm. She looked up and met the man's pitch-black eyes. Without giving the man a chance to speak, she smiled. However, I don't hate this feeling. Chapter 177. The small fireflies were not as big and easy to control as animals. In order to train this batch of fireflies, he had put in a lot of effort, and many died during this period. Fireflies were not difficult to catch, but catching so many at once was like looking for a needle in a haystack. For her, he really left everything, just to make her happy. As if in this world, in his heart, there was nothing more important than her. From the last loss of anger and jealousy, every time he thought of it, he had a lingering fear. He always thought that Feng Jiuqing was a gentleman. He promised him that he would not hurt her, and since he said he would do it. He did as he said, and left. In half a month, he conquered half of the country for him, and used it to exchange for Jiu Yueqin's conditions. Mo Wushang hugged her tightly in his arms. The pain after losing. The joy and excitement after regaining what had been lost. Mo Wushang just wanted to stay by her side forever, and not leave for a moment. He wanted to protect her personally, and not let anyone hurt her. Even if she hated him, and was tired of him. He only knew that as long as he was by her side, shielding her from the wind and rain, clearing all obstacles for her, and killing all those who hurt her, she would not be hurt. His love for her, perhaps it was really deep to the point of bone marrow. It didn't matter if she had changed her appearance or body. He could always recognize her. He knew the feeling in his heart. It was all the throbbing and the sense of familiarity and protection from the bottom of his heart when he faced her. No matter what you like, I will search the world for it, and find it for you. As long as she could smile at him, the sacrifice, everything, for him, was worth it. Strange, in the middle of the night, why are there so many fireflies flying in the imperial garden? At this time, a man's voice came from below. Hearing this voice, Shen Yueji withdrew her gaze from the man. Her dark eyes were covered with a layer of frost. Mo Wushang's sharp lips were pursed into a straight line, revealing his master's mood at the moment. It was time to order people to patrol around and sweep away all the obstacles when he and Jia were alone. Don't touch me, another sharp voice rang out. But it was deliberately suppressed. As soon as she heard this familiar voice, Shen Yueji was shocked. Almost immediately, He recognized the owner of the voice. "Little hussy, I don't know why you were crying under me when you were asking me to do something for you. What's the matter? I've already done something for you, and now you're turning your back on me?" In the Imperial Garden, the figures of a man and a woman arguing were elongated by the light from the fireflies. Lu Qingrou's delicate and beautiful face had a sickly pale complexion. She was dressed in white, and her delicate body was so thin that it looked like it could collapse at any moment. Shen Yueji still remembered that Lu Qingrou's beauty had once stunned her with a single glance. She still remembered that when she first saw her, she was dazed for a long time by Lu Qingrou's sickly beauty. How could there be such a beautiful woman in this world? Her beauty caused people to involuntarily feel pity for her. The difference between her and Jiyu Yuyin was that her gentleness was somewhat fake, while Lu Qingrou was truly sickly. Wasn't Lu Qingrou supposed to be in the cold palace? How did she get out? Chapter 178. Under the dim light, Lu Qingrou's pale face was even more lovable, but at this moment, there was a layer of coldness in her eyes that was colder than ice. "This is the Imperial Garden. I don't want to be fucked by you in a place like the Imperial Garden." The woman's cold and explicit words made Shen Yueji look at her a few more times. Her impression of Lu Qingrou was not like this. She was gentle, considerate, and always treated her with an endless supply of soft words and soft words. Her watery eyes seemed to be able to speak, and her favorite thing to do was to hold her hand and talk to her. But the current Lu Qingrou, she could not feel the warmth in the depths of her eyes. Her pale face was covered with a layer of frost, and the words that came out of her crimson lips were no longer as gentle and soft as before. Instead, they were filled with sharpness. Beside her stood an ordinary-looking man in eunuch uniform. His body was slightly bent, and he looked a little hunched. He looked ordinary, and his skin was yellow. Shen Yueji stared at the man seriously for a moment. It was fake. This man had changed his appearance. He was not from the palace. The Imperial Garden is more exciting. Who would come to the Imperial Garden in the middle of the night? "I don't know how many men have entered your Huiyang Palace. You've probably used all the places, right? I don't want to use the places those men have used." As he spoke, the man reached out and touched Lu Qingrou's smooth face, a pair of dark eyes filled with lust, unscrupulously sweeping across her chest. Lu Qingrou did not dodge, but her charming face became colder and colder. Her sharp eyes were filled with pain and indifference after struggling. The man took the opportunity to push her down into a pile of grass, just enough to cover their bodies. "Don't worry, my ears are sensitive. I can even hear a bird flying past. If someone comes, I will definitely notice." At this moment, the two people on the roof, Shen Yueji turned back to look at the man beside her. They were on the roof, and one below, not far from here, right? The man's handsome face showed an indifferent expression. Shen Yueji was no longer suspicious. It should be Mo Wushang's trick. Seeing the man so confident, his martial arts must be extremely high. The dense flowers and grass covered their bodies. Even though they were high up, they could not see through the flowers and see the people inside. Shen Yueji's heart was filled with mixed feelings. Lu Qingrou could be considered as a ray of light in her dark and helpless days. If Feng Zhouqing was her everything, then Lu Qingrou was the most unforgettable light in the depths of her heart. She had always thought that Lu Qingrou was noble and elegant. Sometimes, he also felt that she was ignorant of the ways of the world, pure like a piece of white paper. But now, looks like you've been living well these days. There are quite a lot of marks left on your body by those men. Lu Qingrou, is it worth it? The man's dark eyes were locked on her delicate collarbone. There were rows of uneven love bites everywhere. Some were deep, some were shallow, and none were missed. Lu Qingrou just closed her eyes and did not speak. The man sneered and licked her white neck fiercely. Is it worth it to receive so many men you don't like for a dead person who has been dead for so long? Chapter 179. Lu Qingrou's thin body trembled vigorously. She opened her eyes, her long eyelashes trembled, and her gem-like eyes shot out a cold light. Remember the relationship between us. The man sneered, no longer talking nonsense, and focused on taking from her body. Her nails dug deep into the soil. Lu Qingrou closed her eyes, feeling the humiliation coming from her body. After dawn, you are responsible for spreading what happened in the palace these days, the more the better. The man kissed her lips passionately, noticed her avoidance, and smiled sinisterly. You should have the attitude to ask for help. After all, this is the palace. The emperor is not a fool. Hearing this, Lu Qingru stopped moving. The man kissed her delicate lips as he wished, and sucked hard a few times. No wonder those people in the pugilistic world work hard for you. Little bitch, you are really a poison. The more people eat, the more addicted they become. Even I fell because of you. On the roof. Listening to the man's low words, the thin sweat on Shen Yueji's palms slowly dissipated, leaving only a layer of coldness. She understood the man's words even if she was a fool. The dead person he was talking about was her. Lu Qingru once plotted a rebellion for her, assassinated the empress, and lost the whole family's life. Her relatives, unlike her father and mother, all loved her, and Lu Qingru had a deep relationship with them. When they learned that Lu Qingru had an accident, they used the lives of the whole family in exchange for Lu Qingru's safety. Two-headed monster. It turned out that in addition to the two-headed monster, there were many people who worked for her. She had been thinking, she understood Lu Qingru's identity. They knew each other very early, her character, her identity. After the Lu family was gone, she was a weak woman in the harem who had no one to rely on, and it was extremely difficult for her to survive. How did she control the two-headed monster to work for her? Now, the doubts that lingered in Shen Yueji's heart were finally solved. She used her own body in exchange for those men to work for her. People in the pugilistic world, all kinds of strange, ruthless methods. There was no lack of ugly and despicable people. Her eyes were locked on the two people in the flowers, the swaying grass. Except for the man's disgusting roar, she did not make any movement, as if she was a dead person. It was humiliating. In her heart, she also knew that it was humiliating. Qingru. Qingru, he muttered the name in his heart. You actually sacrificed so much for me. Is it really worth it? Our relationship is just a playmate. I'm already dead. You've sacrificed your whole family's lives and your innocence for a dead man. You've sacrificed so much for me, but I've never given you anything. Why are you so good to me? She wanted to go down, she wanted to rush up, she wanted to tear the man on top of her into pieces. But she knew she couldn't. Even the man beside her seemed to know she was going to do this and didn't give her a chance to move at all. So what if he rushed down? What had happened was a foregone conclusion. The Lu family was gone, and her body had been bullied by countless men. Did she rush down to kill that man? Or should he tell her who he was? She had sacrificed so much for her, and now that she had seen the worst side of her, how would she feel? Shen Yueji sat there for a long time. After the man was done, he helped Lu Qingru put on her clothes and carried her out of the bushes. Chapter 180. She saw a flash of disgust in Lu Qingru's eyes and struggled to get out of the man's arms. She limped away alone. Remember what you promised me. The man looked at her leaving figure and couldn't help but scold. Bah, little bitch, going back alone. It seems that there is a new man in Huiyang Palace. After the man finished scolding, he also disappeared in a flash. The imperial garden returned to its previous silence, as if what happened just now was just a small interlude. Shen Yueji's heart couldn't calm down for a long time. She had no time to appreciate those glowing fireflies, but stared at the direction in which Lu Qingru left, until her thin figure slowly disappeared at the end of the corner. Did you know it from the beginning? The man didn't speak. Shen Yueji smiled. She knew it from looking at him, but she shouldn't blame him, shouldn't ask why he didn't stop her. Because her identity didn't allow it, because Lu Qingru had nothing to do with him. He had always been a cold person. Help me find a person. Okay. If it's useless, help me kill him. Mo Wushang's black eyes were calm, and his thin lips opened slightly. Okay. After returning to Fengqi Palace, Shen Yueji's mind was full of Lu Qingru, thinking of their past, thinking of the little things they had together. Later, she thought of the 3 days after she entered the palace, her persuasion, comfort, and protection. She thought of the first day she entered the palace. A concubine came to find trouble with her and offered her a cup of tea. Although there was no poison in it, there was a fierce medicine that could cause abdominal pain for 6 hours. She saw the clues and knew that she didn't want to cause trouble in the harem and make things difficult for Feng Joching, so she drank the cup of tea for her. She was in so much pain in Huayang Palace that she wanted to die, clutching her stomach and rolling on the bed. Her white forehead was full of cold sweat. She endured it alone. She rushed to her, she fell into her arms, endured the pain, smiled at her weak body, and said, "Fortunately it wasn't you." That night, she said a lot of things to her. She said, she protected her. She came to protect her. She asked her why she did it. It was just a cup of tea. She could drink it herself. She said that she didn't want her to suffer any harm. Not to mention tea, even if it was poison, as long as it was related to her, she would drink it without hesitation. My head hurts. At the same time, waves of pain could be felt from his heart. Shen Yueji leaned into the man's arms. Everything in the perching Phoenix Palace was dark. The candles had all been extinguished. Only the man's beating heart and warm embrace could bring her back to reality. I know you're powerful in the Feng Nation, and you're on par with Feng Joching. Can you promise me one thing? She grabbed the man's collar and didn't give him a chance to refuse. Help me protect her secretly, okay? The man didn't stay silent for long. He wrapped her hand in his palm and kissed it gently. Okay. Mo Wushang, aren't you going to ask me why? The person who had a good relationship with Lu Qingru was Jiu Yuqin, not Shen Yueji. The Shen Yueji in everyone's eyes had nothing to do with Lu Qingru. Even if they saw her tonight, she was just a stranger. But she couldn't even take care of the people in the harem, so how could she take care of others? The man's dark eyes flashed, and he patted her back to comfort her. Sleep. Chapter 181. After she fell asleep, the man stared at her delicate and pretty face for a while, then tucked her in and carefully got up to leave. Inside Huayang Palace, after soaking in the bathtub for nearly 4 hours, Lu Qingru put on her clothes and sat in front of the dressing mirror. Hearing the noise outside and feeling the familiar cold aura approaching, she smiled slightly and waved her hand to dismiss the only servant girl in the main hall. I didn't expect that this palace's small Huayang Palace could attract such a great Buddha like the Prince Regent. Not getting a response from the man, Lu Qingru smiled instead, and there was more sarcasm in her smile. She looked at the handsome man behind her through the bronze mirror. When Qin was alive, the Prince Regent was devoted to her, and his feelings were as deep as the sea, but he couldn't get a response. After Qin's death, you were depressed and blamed yourself, so you locked yourself in the Prince Regent's residence and didn't participate in anything. This palace always thought that you were a man who was wholeheartedly devoted to Qin. The sarcasm in her eyes became stronger and stronger. Qin's corpse hasn't even turned cold, but you already had an affair with that new imperial consort Shen. You stayed in that woman's palace day and night, not willing to leave even for a moment. You men are really flowery with flowery words. Mo Wushang, since you are not wholeheartedly devoted to Qin, why did you come to provoke her? Lu Qingru suddenly got up from the round chair, and her slender white fingers slammed the table in front of her, making an ear-piercing sound. The jewelry placed on the table fell to the ground. Although this Huayang Palace was a cold palace, her title as one of the 4 concubines was still there, and all the food and clothing here were still there. Other than the servant girls and eunuchs who were driven out by her, Feng Joching's treatment towards her could be considered as giving face to the Lu family. Mo Wushang looked at her indifferently. His dark eyes were as calm as a pool of stagnant water. But it was this look of his that completely angered Lu Qingru. Do you know? She suddenly roared at him, her huge eyeballs rolling down from the corner of her eyes. Her body trembled, and her pale face was filled with vicious disgust and hatred. Mo Wushang, do you know how helpless she was that day? Why did you leave? Why did you leave her when she was most helpless? You keep saying that you love her, that you care about her, that you don't care about this country, that you can give up everything for her, but why did you leave that day? Lu Qingru's voice trembled as she recalled the scene of that day. Her heart was torn apart by waves of pain. She clutched at her heart and cried out loud, "Sometimes, I wish I was a man who held military power and could rebel for her sake. I wanted to save her, but at the cost of my whole family's lives, I realized that I still couldn't save her. I went to beg that man, but that man was really heartless. One day after another, I knocked my head on the ground until it broke my skin and bled, but he didn't let go. To me, a day has passed so quickly, so quickly. One was a man who had been deeply in love with her for 9 years, the other was a man who loved her and was willing to give up everything for her, but in the end, he forced her to her death. In her most helpless moment, one was the man who personally sentenced her to death. The other, who could have saved her, had disappeared. Lu Qingru felt like she was about to go crazy. Chapter 182. Tears covered her pale face. She didn't know where to place her hands and gestured around. Her trembling fingers touched her tear-stained face. Qin My Qin if she was a man, she would be the first person to meet her. She would definitely treat her well, pamper her, and bring her to a faraway place. She wouldn't let her suffer so much humiliation and torture. From the beginning to the end, Mo Wushang's gaze towards her was cold, and without a shred of emotion. Lu Qingru had long known that he would be like this. If it was in the past, when she mentioned Jiyu Yuqin to him, no matter how cold and emotionless he was, there would still be struggle and regret on his face when she mentioned her name. But now, she suddenly smiled. It seems that the position of the youngest daughter of the Shen family in your heart has already far surpassed Qin. She walked towards the man step by step. Mo Wushang stood in the same place. As she walked closer, there was no expression on his handsome face. Lu Qingru stopped a step away from him. Since you can't be wholeheartedly devoted to Qin, why did you provoke her? If it wasn't for you, she wouldn't have died. Even she herself wasn't sure about the last sentence. Indeed, if it wasn't for Mo Wushang, Jiyu Yuqin wouldn't have died. But this time, it didn't mean that there wouldn't be a next time. Jiyu Yuqin would die sooner or later. The Jiyu family wouldn't let her go. Lu Qingru smiled weakly. What are you doing here? Don't hurt her. Ha! Shen Yueji. Lu Qingru sneered. Looking at his eyes, her self-deprecation deepened. Mo Wushang, your heart changes really fast. You're already protecting her. She's ruined my plans time and again. Why can't I hurt her? The man's cold brows furrowed. It was a sign of anger. Others might be afraid, but Lu Qingru had nothing now. She only had herself left. Ever since Jiyu Yuqin died, she had been living a life worse than death. To her, life and death were all the same. Therefore, while everyone else was extremely afraid of Mo Wushang, she was the only one who was not afraid. She took the last step and walked in front of the man, meeting his cold and gloomy eyes. Mo Wushang, I also want you to have a taste of your beloved being killed by someone else. Bang! In just a moment, her thin and weak body was sent flying. Smashing in front of the dressing mirror, the bronze mirror shattered into pieces. Many of the broken mirror pieces pierced into her delicate flesh. She was in so much pain that her face scrunched up. Blood flowed all over the floor and dyed her thin clothes red. Even so, she still had a smile on her face. If you have the ability, why don't you kill me? Mo Wushang, aren't you very capable? Ruining my plans for that woman, you heartless men. After Qin's death, you casually loved her for a few days. Now that you have another woman, you have long thrown her to the back of your mind. You don't want to avenge her, but you can't stop me. Chapter 183. Why does everyone remember Jiyu Yuyin? Everyone praises her for being kind, beautiful, dignified, and generous. Everyone praises her for being the Empress of Foam Country and saying that she and the Emperor are a match made in heaven. Why can't they remember Qin? Can't they remember Qin's good side? Her vision became hazy again. Lu Qingru gripped the broken mirror fragment on the ground tightly. Blood flowed out of her palm like pearls. She didn't feel any pain. She just stared at the bright red blood that blurred her vision. I know the identity of any person in the pugilistic world who has an affair with you. The man's cold words made Lu Qingru's bent back instantly straighten. If you dare let them hurt Ji, I will make them disappear from this world forever. Why? Lu Qingru was completely furious. Mo Wushang, why can't I hurt her? You can abandon Qin for this woman. How can you face Qin by doing this? Lu Qingru climbed up from the ground in embarrassment and looked at him. Kill them? She thought it was ridiculous. Can you kill all the people in the pugilistic world? If you kill one today, I can find new people in the future. In front of him, she deliberately tore the clothes in front of her chest. She had just taken a bath and her clothes were thin. She didn't wear anything underneath. Almost immediately, her snow-white body was mottled with ambiguous marks, which entered the man's eyes. The man's gaze was cold. Even if it was a woman in front of him, there was no fluctuation in his dark eyes. It was as if the person in front of him was not a woman, but a dead person. Why are you pretending to be a gentleman? Mo Wushang lightly pursed his lips. His sharp lips looked like they were covered with a layer of snow. I will listen to you and not kill you. Take care of yourself. Mo Wushang. Seeing that he was about to leave, Lu Qingru quickly blocked in front of him. You really want to kill me? If you dare to have any ideas on Ji I will kill you. I am taking revenge for Qin So what? The man sneered. I won't stop you from taking revenge, but don't hurt my woman. Your woman? Lu Qingru almost laughed out loud. She looked at him mockingly. What about Qin The man's handsome face was unaffected. Both. You're really infatuated. Mo Wushang walked past her, his sharp aura causing Lu Qingru's entire body to shiver. After he left, his cold words sent a chill down her spine, like a blade stabbing into her heart. I don't want to get involved in your affairs, but remember my warning. Empress. After Mo Wushang left, Lu Hui hurriedly came in. When she saw Lu Qingru covered in blood, tears instantly rolled down her face. He stepped forward to support her frail body. Her body was like a piece of white paper, thin and light. How was this the body of a human? Her heart ached as tears fell from her eyes. Niang Niang, why do you have to do this? Hui you don't understand. Lu Qingru had used up all the strength in her body when she was arguing with Mo Wushang. She fell powerlessly into Lu Hui's arms. Chapter 184. Lu Qingru clenched her fists, her face pale, and smiled. Even if I can't win, what can I do? I only know that those who hurt Qin they will pay the price. Even if I have to risk my life, I will make them regret it. Tell Yin, forget about the Phoenix Palace first. Your Highness. Lu Hui frowned. Didn't you say first? Lu Qingru glanced at her. Compared to her, the person I want to deal with is that bitch Jiu Yuyin. Lu Hui looked at her with heartache. All these years, she had been by her highness' side and watched her walk all the way. It would be a lie to say that she did not hate Jiu Yuyin in her heart. If it was not for Jiu Yuyin, her family's miss would not have become like this. The miss used to be such a proud, holy, and clean person. But now, she did not dare to think about it anymore, especially when she saw Lu Qingru's injuries. Your Highness, this servant will bandage your wounds first. Lu Qingru coughed heavily and brushed her hand away. I won't die. Your Highness. Lu Hui saw her push her away and walked into the inner hall in a sorry state. She shouted in a hoarse voice. The pain I suffered today, compared to Qin is nothing. In the end, she closed her eyes helplessly. Lu Hui shook her head and left. Something big happened in the harem. The next day, Shin Yueji woke up and subconsciously touched the side of her body. She found that it was cold. Obviously the man had left for a long time. Double happiness came in with a basin of water to help her freshen up. Your Highness, this servant has something to tell you next. She smiled sweetly. All her good mood was revealed on her face. Rubbing her aching eyebrows, Shin Yueji walked in front of her, took the towel and wiped her face. What is it? Your Highness must not have thought that this matter is related to Jiu Yuyin. Oh! Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows. After seeing Lu Qingru last night, she knew that something was going to happen today. Listening to her calm tone, as if she already knew. Your Highness, you already know? Know what? The Empress. In the past few days, all of the incidents have been directed at Xionghe Palace. Although Your Majesty has the intention to suppress it, not everyone in the inner palace is like Ben Gong who doesn't like to cause trouble. You only need to incite one or two people to leak a thing or two. In a place like the inner palace, one will spread to 10 10 will spread to 100. No matter how great your Majesty's heirs are, it will be difficult to stop the mouths of the people in the inner palace. Your ladyship is right. In any case, the Gu family has been pushed to the heart of the struggle this time. When this servant went to the imperial kitchen, I heard all the servants in the imperial kitchen talking about the empress and the former empress. Many people changed sides, saying that the late empress was framed by the empress when she was alive. Otherwise, they wouldn't be haunting the empress after death. There's also the matter of Tang Cai. After these two things happened, this servant also heard that the ministers in the imperial court wrote many memorials to the emperor. Although they didn't dare to speak recklessly in these memorials, this servant heard that Prime Minister Gu was so angry that his face turned green. Where's the emperor? Compared to the harem's every move, Shen Yueji wanted to know Feng Zhouqing's reaction the most. His Majesty. Chapter 185. Hearing this, Shen Yueji suddenly smiled. She didn't know why she was smiling. Your Highness. Sometimes, I feel that His Majesty loves her very much. But sometimes, I feel that he doesn't love her. Tell me, how much of His Majesty's love for Empress is true? How much is it fake? This, she shook his head. I'm not sure either. When His Majesty and Your Highness are together, sometimes he is very protective of Your Highness in front of Empress. But once Your Highness makes a mistake, His Majesty will be partial to Empress. For example, Empress's mistake these 2 days. If it was Your Highness, His Majesty might have punished Your Highness. But it was Empress who His Majesty indulges. No matter how much His Majesty likes Empress, I feel that His Majesty's behavior and kindness to Empress are too strange. Really? It seems that I'm not the only one who thinks so. Your Highness, you think so too? She was surprised. Shen Yueji glanced at him and nodded. Yes. Gu family's influence in the court cannot be underestimated. The reason why the emperor was able to become the emperor of the Feng Kingdom is because the Gu family risked their lives. But there was one thing that Shen Yueji was suspicious of. Feng Zhouqing had seen the Gu family's loyalty to Feng Zhouqing all these years. If it was as he guessed, Feng Zhouqing's kindness to Gu Yuyin was all an act. If he could put on an act for Gu Yuyin, was he also putting on an act for the Gu family? He had always trusted and respected his own people. Putting aside how much Gu Wei had sacrificed to help him, just the fact that he had handed over half of his military power to Gu Wei after he succeeded to the throne was enough to show how much he valued Gu Wei. Even the men of the Gu family were all put in important positions by him. It was hard to guess the heart of an emperor. After all, she and Feng Zhouqing had been married for 9 years. She had seen how well he treated the Gu family. If he really guarded against the Gu family, he wouldn't have given so much military power to Gu Wei and the Gu family's sons after he succeeded to the throne. Unless, a bad guess arose from the bottom of her heart. She didn't know if this guess could be confirmed. According to her understanding of Feng Zhouqing over the years, did he start to have feelings for the Gu family recently? Except for this one thought. Shen Yueji couldn't figure out the reason behind Feng Zhouqing's actions. But what good would it do him if he lost the right-hand man of the Gu family? Compared to his loyalty to the Shen family, Shen Yueji could admit that her father and brother could really rebel against Feng Zhouqing for her sake. But the Gu family wouldn't. The Gu family had schemed for so many years to obtain power, splendor, wealth, and rank. Furthermore, the Gu clan had no ambition, they only had loyalty to Feng Zhouqing. Among the men of the Gu clan, there was no one who wanted to rebel and become the emperor. Who cares? We don't care what the emperor thinks about the empress. In any case, this servant only knows that Your Highness is doing well. That Gu Yuyin wouldn't dare to cause trouble for Your Highness. Wasn't it just that her status was slightly higher than her ladyship? But this Feng Qi Palace, is the same palace as His Majesty's. It should be the Empress's palace. Didn't Your Highness notice that from the moment Your Highness entered the palace, His Majesty intentionally or unintentionally treated Your Highness's status as the Empress's? After Double Happiness's reminder, Shen Yueji seemed to understand. Chapter 186. Feng Zhouqing was the emperor, so he was accompanied by a phoenix. However, Jiu Yuan's residence was just an auspicious palace without any meaning. This phoenix perch palace, on the other hand, had fallen into her hands. Thinking about the decorations in auspicious palace and her phoenix palace, they were the same size. Even the priceless decorations, Feng Zhouqing also ordered Gao Dezhong to secretly decorate them for her. The emperor is here. While she was thinking, Gao Dezhong's voice suddenly came from outside the hall. Shen Yueji was shocked. She did not expect Feng Zhouqing to come to her at this time. Logically speaking, shouldn't he have been troubled over the past few days? Because she knew he would not come, she was lazy and did not put on makeup. Even her hair was messy, except for washing her face. She lifted the hem of her dress and ran to the inner hall. Double happiness, help me block the people outside. I need to change my clothes. Before she finished, Double happiness had knelt down. Your Majesty. Shen Yueji was speechless. Knowing that her makeup was a disgrace to the sacred eyes, Shen Yueji stiffened her body and turned her back to the emperor. She did not dare to look back. The emperor's gaze swept over her body. She could feel his gaze sweeping over her. Feng Zhouqing's clear face was calm. He stared at her stiff back for a while and waved his hand to let the servants in the hall leave. Gao Dezhong and Double Happiness accepted the order and got up to leave. The emperor walked behind her and frowned tiredly. Did you just get up, imperial concubine? Ah. I slept late last night. I will. Shen Yueji turned around and saluted the emperor. Greetings, Your Majesty. Feng Zhouqing did not help her up. He quietly stared at her half-bent body for a while. Imperial concubine. Ah. I'm not happy. Shen Yueji was speechless. She forced herself to lower her head. Shen Yueji's waist was almost sore, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. I don't know what Your Majesty is unhappy about. Did those officials in the court make Your Majesty angry? Have you heard about the rumor in the harem today? I just got up and haven't heard about it. Shen Yueji flatly denied it. The man sneered, that Yahuan of yours has the same temperament as you. I'm afraid that Guifei did not wake up early. Her entire mind was focused on listening to what that Yahuan said about the inner palace. Shen Yueji's mouth twitched. She knew that the man wasn't angry. She curled her lips and said, just as I was getting excited, Your Majesty's sudden visit really made this concubine panic. Feng Zhouqing helped her up. Go put on some clothes. Be careful not to catch a cold. Shen Yueji was terrified and extremely flattered. She walked to the inner hall, put on some clothes and came out. The man sat on the beauty chair she had just sat on, holding a cup of tea in his slender hand. He stared at the steaming teacup for a long time, not drinking for a long time, not knowing what he was thinking. Emperor? She walked up to the man and called out. Feng Zhouqing calmly returned to his senses and looked at her. Imperial consort, do you have anything interesting to say to make me happy? So the sudden visit was because he was unhappy. Shen Yueji was speechless. She stared at him with a sad face. Your Majesty, aren't you making things difficult for me? Feng Zhouqing raised his eyebrows. How am I making things difficult for you? You're unhappy, but you can't make me unhappy. Besides, I'm afraid you found the wrong person to make you happy. Chapter 187. He probably felt that what she said made sense. But after listening to her first few words, Feng Zhouqing's eyes sank. You seem to be very happy to see me unhappy. Of course not. Shen Yueji forced a smile. I'm happy not because Your Majesty is unhappy, but I heard from eunuch Gao that Imperial concubine Moon ran to Your Majesty to complain about me and frame me. Your Majesty chose to tolerate and trust me, and also let eunuch Gao pass a message to let me deal with Imperial concubine Moon myself. I'm happy that Your Majesty protects me. His beautiful eyebrows raised, and the emperor understood. Imperial concubine, do you think I'm protecting you? Isn't it? Feng Zhouqing chuckled. It's a fact that you have private contact with the regent, and what Imperial concubine Moon said is the truth. I didn't listen to her, not because I believe you, But because I'm covering up for you. I admit that I have private contact with the regent, but your majesty, you know it, and I don't have that kind of feelings for the regent. Moreover, his majesty is well aware of who the prince regent likes. Even if the prince regent came to this concubine's palace, he would definitely be looking for trouble. It would absolutely not be like what Imperial Concubine Moon said, framing this concubine and the prince regent. The man teased her. You have a sharp tongue. He slowly closed his eyes. Imperial Concubine. Hey! Shin Yueji got up from the ground. Your Majesty, what can I do for you? I'm tired, give me a shoulder massage. Okay. Shin Yueji turned behind him with a fawning face. She could not be more diligent. A pair of new little claws rubbed his shoulders lightly yet heavily. The emperor was displeased. Imperial Concubine, you haven't eaten? Shin Yueji answered eagerly, I haven't eaten. Feng Joqing coughed and pulled a plate of pastries on the tea table. Shin Yueji thought that the man was considerate to give it to her. She was about to say thank you and take the pastries from him. Unexpectedly, the man turned his hand and slowly put the delicate pastries into his mouth. The man ate elegantly, chewing slowly. His crimson thin lips were more tempting than the pastries. Hence, Shin Yueji couldn't help but tighten her grip. She gnashed her teeth and glared at the man for a long time. Feng Joqing closed his eyes in satisfaction. That's more like it. Shin Yueji's hands were sore, and she didn't know how long she had been helping him. She looked sideways at the man's perfect side profile and closed her eyes. Her long eyelashes were neat and beautiful, and her crimson lips were soft and clean. There was a faint sound of breathing. Is he asleep? She walked from the man's back to his front and carefully looked at the man's exquisite and perfect face. It was as if a gentle breeze was caressing his face. His impeccable good looks could not conceal the fatigue on his face. She reached out her hand subconsciously. When he was tired, he would often do this. He would return to her side, and she would massage his brows and shoulders. He would speak to her gently, very gently, very gently. As he spoke, he would fall asleep. The way he fell asleep was very quiet and beautiful. It was more beautiful than a painting. But when she was about to touch the man's handsome face, Shin Yueji quickly withdrew her hand and took out a cloak from the inner hall and put it on him. Chapter 188. Feng Joqing slept for a long time. During this time, Shin Yueji raised her head and looked at him several times. She ate the pastries to stave off her hunger. Not long after, her stomach started growling again. She ordered double happiness to prepare the meal. She had planned to wait for Feng Joqing to wake up and eat together, but he was sleeping soundly and didn't look like he was going to wake up. So she finished eating by herself. It had been a long time since they had their lunch. Shin Yueji held her chin and looked at the man's handsome face. Did this guy not sleep for a day and a night? Your Highness, do you think His Majesty will wake up? Double Happiness, who was at the side, looked worried. Shin Yueji slapped her and glared at her. What nonsense are you talking about? No, I'm worried. Double Happiness felt wronged. The regent definitely didn't know that the emperor was here. The emperor had been busy dealing with government affairs these days and hadn't had a good night's sleep. If he slept until night and had dinner with the regent, at that time, the regent would appear and disappear mysteriously and bump into him again. What should she do? Shin Yueji stared at the man's gentle sleeping face for a long time, walked over and took off the cloak covering him. Perhaps it was because people would naturally feel cold when they were asleep. Not long after, she saw the man's long eyelashes move a few times. He was about to wake up. Shin Yueji quickly put the cloak on the man. A scream. Her wrist was grabbed by the man, and as the man exerted force, Shin Yueji fell into his arms. The chaise longue was custom-made according to the degree of comfort, so it was different from other chairs. She was lying in Feng Joqing's arms, and the posture was extremely ambiguous. Feng Joqing didn't seem to expect this situation. He looked at the little woman's blushing face. Shin Yueji's eyes darted around, and her little paws patted the man's chest shyly. Your Majesty, what are you doing? You almost scared me to death. Feng Joqing pushed her away with a headache and rubbed his faintly aching eyebrows. You scared me to death, imperial concubine. What time is it? Shuangxi, who was waiting at the side, hurriedly replied, replying to your majesty, it's about the time. 5 o'clock. The emperor murmured as he looked at the sulking little head at the side. We have slept for so long, has imperial consort eaten? Shen Yueji wiped the residue from the corner of her mouth. No. Feng Joqing. The man smiled and reached out to her. Come here. Shen Yueji hesitated. Just now, His Majesty pushed this concubine away. Since imperial consort is so close to Zhen is afraid that imperial consort will suddenly have ill intentions towards Zhen. Shen Yueji stared at him and waved the cloak in her hand. This Kia was afraid that your majesty would catch a cold, so I put a cloak on your majesty. Who knew that before the cloak could be put on, I would be disliked by your majesty. Oh! His gaze fell on the cloak in her hands. Feng Joqing stood up. Gao Dezhong. Gao Dezhong heard the noise and came in. He said respectfully, Your Majesty, you're awake. Prepare the meal. Prepare the meal. Gao Dezhong was puzzled. He looked at Shen Yueji subconsciously and said, Didn't you just? His Majesty is hungry, hurry up and tell the servants to prepare the meal, eunuch Gao. Shuangxi, who was standing at the side, hurriedly answered. Gao Dezhong no longer hesitated. He responded respectfully and retreated. The emperor walked to the tea table and sat down. Chapter 189. Rub. Shen Yueji blushed. If you can gain some weight in the palace, it will be easier for me to explain to General Shen. Rub. Shen Yueji's face turned red. Feng Joqing pushed the cup of tea she poured to her. Don't forget to drink tea when you eat. Be careful not to choke. Your Majesty. Shen Yueji blushed and stared at him. I was wrong. Feng Joqing didn't even look at her. Instead, he casually replied, What's wrong? I shouldn't eat alone. I should wait for your Majesty to wake up and eat together. Or wake up your Majesty to eat together. Heh, the man chuckled. Grabbing the man's hand, Shen Yueji's heart thumped wildly. Your Majesty, this concubine saw that your Majesty was too tired and finally fell asleep, so this concubine didn't have the heart to wake your Majesty up, so this concubine ate first. I planned to wait until evening when your Majesty wakes up, and then eat together. Feng Joqing pulled his hand out of the woman's arms, and the depression in his eyes deepened. Imperial concubine, there is a difference between men and women. You should behave yourself. She was choked by him countless times. No matter how good her temper was, Shen Yueji couldn't go against him again. She sat on the round chair across from him, looking straight at the man's gentle face, as if she was a dead pig not afraid of boiling water. Your Majesty, do you have a prejudice against me? The man's hand stopped and the tea spilled. He poured another cup and pushed it to Shen Yueji. Tell me. Your Majesty, why don't you deny it? Deny what? The emperor raised his eyebrows. Your Majesty, do you really have a prejudice against me? Say it. Shen Yueji was speechless. It seemed that he really had a prejudice against her. Shen Yueji cried. Your Majesty, I don't think I've offended you. Why do you treat me like this? Her words made the emperor puzzled. Feng Joqing pushed back the tea he had just poured for her and drank it himself. After drinking the tea, he looked at her. What is the meaning of this, Guifei? Shen Yueji pointed at the empty teacup in front of her. That's what I mean. The emperor clearly poured this tea for this Chunxie. Why is it that when this Chunxie wanted to drink it, he took it back and drank it himself? Feng Joqing twirled the teacup in his hand and couldn't help but smile. So, Imperial Consort wants to drink. I didn't know, so I'll pour another cup for Imperial Consort. She watched as he pushed the cup of tea towards her. Shen Yueji was afraid that he would change his mind at the last minute, so she quickly took it and drank it in one gulp. When she saw the man's calm and clear eyes, she suddenly revealed a shocked expression. Just as she was feeling puzzled, the scalding sensation in her mouth immediately assaulted her. She looked like she wanted to cry, but she didn't dare to be angry. He had thoroughly pleased the emperor. Feng Joqing walked behind her and patted her back lightly. Shen Yueji sobbed, looking extremely sullen. Your Majesty, you bullied this concubine. Feng Zhouqing sighed helplessly. When I was asleep, Imperial Consort took off my clothes and ate and drank behind my back. Isn't that the same as bullying me? This kind of behavior was treason in front of the emperor. Shen Yueji knew that he just said it to stop her, so she wasn't angry. She knew when to stop. She slowly wiped away the tears of grievance and sobbed. Chapter 190. Seeing the tears at the bottom of her eyes, Feng Zhouqing pinched a pearl-like tear to the pulp of his finger. His dark eyes were slightly dim as he wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Don't cry. Shen Yueji went around to his back and put the cloak on him. Your Majesty, put on your clothes first. Be careful not to catch a cold. He helplessly stared at her for a while. The little woman sobbed as if she had suffered a great grievance. He did not know whether it was Feng Zhouqing's illusion or not. He had previously said to her that since she could not squeeze out tears, then she should not force herself to cry. This time, her performance was full of emotion, so that he could not distinguish the truth for a moment. The young emperor sighed and rubbed his aching eyebrows. How long has Guifei been in the palace? Shen Yueji counted with her fingers seriously. Answering Your Majesty, it has been more than a month. I heard from old General Shen that the longest time Guifei has been away from home is no more than 7 days. Shen Yueji did not understand and nodded. Feng Zhouqing looked at her with a smile. I want to go out of the palace. Is Guifei willing to follow? Your Majesty wants to go out of the palace? Shen Yueji was shocked. She looked around sneakily and then moved in front of the emperor. Your Majesty, do you think that the beauties in the palace are not worthy of your eyes? Are you going to go out and patrol the country women? The emperor was shocked by her words and his brows turned black. Guifei, do you know what you are talking about? Shen Yueji cooperatively covered her mouth and said, Guifei, I was wrong. I should not have told the truth. He picked her up from the ground and looked into the man's eyes, which seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. Shen Yueji smiled. Your Majesty, I don't know. Guifei is the most beautiful woman in the harem. After going out of the palace, what kind of beauty can be compared with Guifei? Even a stupid person could understand the meaning of the emperor's words. Shen Yueji's pretty face turned red and she covered her little face. Your Majesty, where is the empress? Feng Zhouqing's eyes flashed and asked her to stand properly. The empress is injured and is also the head of the harem. It is not easy for her to go out of the palace with me. Even though he knew that wasn't what she meant, the man still cleverly avoided her question. Shen Yueji stared at the man for a while. When the emperor left the palace this time, he happened to pass by the general's residence. You can also send me back to the general's mansion? The answer was non-committal. Feng Zhouqing nodded his head. Zhen indeed have this intention. After Zhan returns from settling private matters, I will personally visit old General Shen's residence and bring the consort back to the palace. He did not understand why Feng Zhouqing wanted to bring him along. Moreover, from what he said, it seemed like he wanted to send her to the general's mansion before he left, and she would obediently wait for him to come back. Shen Yueji frowned. However, compared to staying in the palace, she wanted to return to the general's estate more. There weren't many rules there, and her father and mother treated her extremely well. She thought for a bit and then raised her head. No matter what the emperor's plan is, as long as it can help the emperor, this concubine is willing to do it. Since Your Majesty wants to bring this concubine out of the palace, then Your Majesty, when do we leave? His slender fingers landed on the tea table. Feng Zhouqing's pitch-black eyes flickered as he suppressed the glint in them. Tomorrow. Chapter 191. She thought that he wouldn't come to her Feng Qi palace these days. There must be a purpose for his sudden visit today. Leaving the palace was a good thing for her. It would make it easier for her to bring Li Yingying into the palace. Similarly, if he wasn't in the palace, she would definitely take this opportunity to get rid of Jiyu Yuyin after she had offended her several times. Just the identity of the empress was enough to suppress her. She couldn't resist it. Thinking of this, Shen Yueji suddenly raised her head and stared at the young emperor for a long time. Perhaps her gaze was so direct that it was hard for Feng Zhouqing to ignore it. What do you want to ask, imperial concubine? Your Majesty, You left me in the general's mansion. Was it because you were worried that after you left the palace, I wouldn't be able to cope in the harem alone? You were worried about me, so you wanted to send me back to the general's mansion first? After you came back, you would take me back. Hearing this, the man suddenly laughed out loud. The man's smile was gentle, elegant, and very charming. But when it fell into Shin Yueji's ears, it was full of infinite sarcasm. Imperial concubine has always thought so highly of yourself. Shin Yueji lowered her head in grievance. To tell you the truth, I have always thought highly of myself. Putting down the teacup in his hand, the emperor looked at her with a smile in his eyes. I had promised old General Shun that I would take care of you in the harem. Imperial concubine is different from the other concubines in the harem. I am afraid that after I leave the palace, Imperial concubine can't cope alone. Of course, I will send you back to the general's mansion first. After I come back, I will take you back. Shin Yueji's tone couldn't tell whether she was surprised or disappointed, so it was father's idea. Feng Jiuqing took a sip of tea slowly and said meaningfully, it was General Shun's idea to let me take care of you in the harem. It was my idea to take you out of the palace. Imperial concubine, don't be confused. These are two things. Your Majesty. Shin Yueji squinted at him. Are you flirting with me? Feng Jiuqing's hand paused. After a long time, he slowly brought the teacup to his mouth. He didn't answer or deny. Whether it was flirting or not, Feng Jiuqing could not be sure. All he knew was that he was comfortable with her, not bored, and that he was less playful with her. Even if he didn't want to admit it, when he was with her, he could let down his guard and fall asleep. His plump fingertips gently rubbed the teacup. The bursts of headache made the man frown again. His hand froze, and the teacup fell from his hand. Shin Yueji jumped in fright and looked at him. Emperor, are you all right? Feng Jiuqing smiled and patted the back of her hand as he looked at the beautiful face that was completely unfamiliar yet familiar to him. I'm fine. Perhaps it's really as Imperial Consort said. She's been handling official business for too long and is tired. Then, Your Majesty, do you want to go in and rest? Although this chaise longue is good, it is not as comfortable as a bed. Feng Jiuqing didn't turn her down. Perhaps it was because of the waves of headache that even he couldn't cope with, but he nodded and allowed her to support him into the inner hall. Your Majesty, why do you suddenly have a headache? Should I call an imperial doctor to take a look? Shin Yueji took off his boots for him and helped him to sit on the bed. Her bright eyes were full of worry. Feng Jiuqing waved his hand. No need. Maybe I'm tired these days. I'll be fine after a rest. Chapter 192. Shin Yueji looked at the man's pale but handsome face. For a moment, she felt that this man was very weak. His pale and powerless face laid there quietly. It was as if at this moment, he was no longer the monarch who ruled over the world, the mighty one. Instead, it was a man who had no one to rely on. He was lying in his small field, sleeping peacefully. She didn't dare to watch any longer. After 9 years of love, even though he had treated her like that, seeing him like this, Shin Yueji realized that the deepest part of her heart was still touched. Feng Jiuqing, she understood him the best. Apart from her, even Jiyu Yuyin had never seen his weakest and most unbearable side. However, he had exposed the truth in front of her, and he had completely buried himself. Your Highness, has His Majesty fallen asleep again? Seeing her coming out, Double Happiness could not help but ask. Shin Yueji nodded. Yes. After saying that, she looked at Gao Dezhong in front of her. Eunuch Gao, I want to ask you something. Answer me truthfully. Your Highness, please ask away. Just now, Ben Gong saw that Your Majesty seemed to be having a headache. Is it because you're tired from handling official business these days? Headache? Gao Dezhong's face turned pale. Realizing that something was wrong, Shin Yueji frowned and looked at him. Tell me honestly. This Gao Dezhong looked troubled. His Majesty is already asleep. Just tell this matter to Ben Gong honestly. Ben Gong won't tell anyone else. After the late Empress passed away, the Emperor would have headaches from time to time when he was dealing with official business. Sometimes, it would be over after a while, but sometimes, The emperor would vomit blood. Shin Yueji was shocked. So serious. Has His Majesty ever called for an imperial physician? His Majesty didn't allow me to summon an imperial physician. He said he was just tired and it wasn't serious. I understand. The thin lips moved, but Shin Yueji didn't say anything in the end. He waved his hand at Gao Dezhong. There's no need to prepare dinner. Let's do it later. The emperor is resting. Yes, Your Highness. Shin Yueji didn't understand why Gao Dezhong would add late empress in front of his name. Was he reminding her that the late empress had passed away and the emperor was also sad and missing her? Was it longing? While thinking, Shin Yueji returned to the inner hall. She slowly sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the man's pitilessly handsome face. Feng Joqing, you actually don't love me at all. You feel guilty, right? Actually, you know that I wouldn't betray you. But in order to gain the trust of the Jiyu family and make them more loyal to you, you didn't listen to my explanation and ordered me to be executed, right? Thinking of this, Shin Yueji felt that she was ridiculous. She was still wondering why her man didn't believe her and why he didn't listen to her explanation. They had been together for 9 years, and she had seen how well he treated her. When she went out with him, they encountered an assassin. That fatal arrow was shot at her, and he blocked it for her without hesitation. The carriage fell off the cliff. She was in the carriage, following the horse that had gone out of control towards the cliff. He was seriously injured, but despite the pain all over his body, he still held onto her tightly. She wanted him to let go. She could die, but with his identity, she would not allow him to die. She could still remember when his eyes had turned red. He did not say anything, but he used his actions to prove to her that he would not let go of her. Even if he died, he would not let go of her. Chapter 193. The poisoned blood overflowed from his shoulder and almost dyed her clothes red. He ignored the danger of losing his hand and pulled her up from the bottom of the cliff. She still remembered the moment she came up. He held her tightly in his arms. At that moment, he was afraid that she would leave him. The feeling of surviving a disaster and regaining a lost treasure. He said, "China, don't be afraid. I'm here. It's okay, it's okay." He ignored the rushing blood on his body and was still thinking of comforting her. The past scenes, from knowing each other and loving each other. Compared with being respectful to each other, she always felt that Feng Joqing loved her. Even if it was just for show, no prince could be the only mistress of the mansion. He didn't even have a concubine, not to mention a side concubine. It was true that she had been faithful to the end, and she was the only one. He would hold her late at night and during the day. No matter how busy he was, he would take time to accompany her. He knew that she suffered a lot when she was in the Prime Minister's mansion. Knowing that she couldn't read, he taught her. He taught her to write his name. He taught her to write her husband. He taught her to play the piano and paint. He drew her eyebrows and tied up her hair. At the palace banquet, there were young ladies from aristocratic families and other princes and concubines who made trouble for her. Even if he couldn't get any benefits, he still protected her behind him without hesitation. When a young lady from an aristocratic family liked him and expressed her love to him, he would hold her hand and look at her affectionately. "Only you in this life." She was framed. The former emperor was furious and ordered her to be beaten 50 times. He didn't say a word or beg for mercy. At the moment when the fierce board fell, he used his body to protect her in his arms and took the beating for her. A lot. Every scene was unforgettable for Shin Yueji. But at the same time, the more affectionate he was in the past, the more annoyed she was now. He said that no one was clean in the battle of the royal family, only my Qin was the cleanest. He said, "I'll protect you. I won't let you come to any harm for the rest of my life." Too many words, too many promises, but in the end, what did he get in return? Feng Joqing, in your heart, in the end, I can't compare to your authority and status. He was the man she had loved for 9 years. Now, he was the high and mighty emperor of the world. To him, she was nothing more than a fleeting cloud. The woman he loved the most was hidden in the secret chamber. At the end of the day, he only felt guilt towards himself. That was right. How could the woman in snow-white clothes in the secret room be compared to her, a dirty woman who had already been humiliated by others? The girl that Feng Jiuqing liked must be clean, kind, pure, and untainted by even a speck of dust. Feng Jiuqing, she opened her lips and murmured softly. Her hand slowly touched her belly. Do you still remember here? Our 3-month-old child, your own flesh and blood, was taken out by you while we were still alive. If we talk about the past, even if you really schemed against me, your love and protection for me, and the hardships you suffered for me are all real. I won't argue with you anymore, but the child, our child, do you know how much I look forward to the birth of a child who has yet to see this world? The man's exquisite face didn't seem to be sleeping well. Looking at him, Shen Yueji's eyes were filled with deep hatred. She was afraid that if she continued to look at him, she wouldn't be able to control herself and kill him. She stood up decisively. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.